Hey everybody, welcome to Do You Believe on Paranormal Zone TV. I want to thank you all so much for being here tonight, and please, if you haven't done so, if you would please subscribe to the show, I'd appreciate it. And please don't forget to give the show a like, because I know you're going to love the show tonight. My guest tonight is Jason Offutt, and he is the author of about like 15, 17 books. He has so many books, I couldn't post everything up there. But Jason does have a website. It's jasonoffutt.com. And you can find out a lot about him on his website and all the books that he offers for sale. But tonight, what lurks beyond is, I'm so excited. I can't wait to hear his stories. Now, Jason grew up on a farm near the little town of Orrick, Missouri. In his life, he's been a farmhand, a journalist, a photographer, a bartender, and the mayor of that small town. Jason now teaches journalism at Northwest Missouri State University in Maryville. So with that, everyone, let's bring on Jason. Hey, Jason.
Hey, Norene, it's great to hear your voice again.
Oh, hey, thanks for coming back on the show. You've written, and in fact, I've got some other books that I would love to put on the show as well for topics, like Haunted Missouri. That will be our next show, I'm hoping. So welcome back to the show, and so let's tell, now, Jason, why did you write this book? I have more information on you, but what's going on in your neighborhood or in your backyard? Why did you write the book?
Well, I had written, it's now a defunct newspaper column, but for 4.5 years, I wrote a newspaper column called From the Shadows, and every week I had a new paranormal story. It was kind of hard to start off because I had to really search, do a whole lot of research for paranormal stories, but then people started reading it and started coming to me with their stories, and I noticed that a lot of these stories were local, and that got me thinking, well, if this dogman sighting, if this ghost story, if this demon possession, if this time travels, if all of these are local to me, what else is out there that people aren't telling me? What can I go out there and find out? So that's what I did. I picked 100 miles. I stuck a pin in the map where my on my hometown. Measured out what 100 miles would be on a string. Put a pencil on it and drew a big circle. And I went out and researched everything I could find within that circle.
Wow! And you state that within that 100 miles, there's cases of demonic possession, alien abduction, time travel, and hauntings, and I think Bigfoot as well.
Yeah, correct. All of that is within 100 miles of my house, and more. And there was I mentioned a dogman sighting. There's just a lot of different things. I got a whole lot more ghost stories and people seeing strange lights in the sky than I put in the book, because I didn't want to have too many of those. Everybody hears ghost stories, so I wanted to get as many big a variety as I possibly could, and I sure did.
How many stories are in that book?
I think I put in 24, if I remember correctly.
Wow. That's awesome. And so these stories not only came from you, but from eyewitnesses?
Right. Well, yeah, that's what I did is I did as much research and ask around as much as I could. And again, I was approached by some people who had stories to tell. And again, ghost stories, demonic possession, the time travel one's pretty fun. We'll talk about that later. And I also found some fairly, a couple of pretty famous cases as well.
Famous cases like what, Jason?
Well, two specifically. I'll start with the not so famous one first, and get to the more famous one second. In Council Bluffs, Iowa, in the early 1970s, there was a young man was out with his girlfriend. Actually, I think if I remember correctly, they just got married. And they were driving in a place called Big Lake Park, which is some place people just drive around on a weekend evening, and they saw a ball in the sky. It was a white ball with a red line around the center of it, and that kind of bothered him because it really shouldn't have been there. And all of a sudden, something dropped out of the bottom of it. The ball rose in the sky and disappeared. They drove toward it and saw some people pulled on the side of the road, and they stopped and asked, and all those people had seen the same thing. And the guy said, well, I got to see more. So he drove closer to it, and when he got there, there was the fire department had already showed up, and the police were there. And fortunately, the guy's dad was the assistant fire chief who was there, and he let this young man get up really close. And I'm going from this guy's perspective because I interviewed him about it. What he saw was a big pile of molten metal sitting on the ground, and this was in December, and it was unusually cold. There was snow on the ground, and this thing was sitting there, and it was hot and it was steaming, and the center part of it was still a whitish blue color. It was that hot, and a lot of people had come out and said that they had seen exactly the same thing. The next day after it cooled off, the fire department broke the metal up. Some people sent it off to be analyzed, and other people took the rest of it as souvenirs. This attracted a lot of attention, most notably Dr. Jacques Vallée, famed French UFO investigator. He went to Council Bluffs, Iowa, and investigated it for a paper he was working on, which can be found online. I found it and read it, and it was about lights in the sky or vehicles that people see that drop metal off, drop metal out of the bottom of them. What was found by scientists who looked over it, and one of them still working at the University of Iowa, Iowa State University. I interviewed him. It turned out to be just the smelter slag, which is what's left over after all of the good, when you're smelting metal, all the metal's taken out, and whatever's left over is the slag, and that's what this was.
Oh my gosh!
And this was this caused some problems here because there was a lot of slag, and it was still white hot. When it was dropped off. So where did it come from? There was a railroad about 100 yards away, but it couldn't have been from the railroad. There was no truck that went by with slag that was white hot and dumped it off in the park. So where the heck did this stuff come from? The thing that Dr. Vallée was investigating was that this had happened a lot, and every single time that the metal that was deposited, it turned out to be smelter slag. And his conclusion was that whatever the extraterrestrials are doing is that they're whatever material they're taking, they're just dumping what's left over because they don't need it anymore, and that's what he figured that this was.
And then whatever it was, it disappeared, but they had dropped all this metal. Is there any indication as to what could have done this? Is it something from outer space, or is it something that we have?
Oh, well, that's a good question. But again, this is early 70s. I think it was 1973. It was a ball. It was a round, large round shape. It took off just straight up into the sky and zipped away. I mean, we at least now don't have anything like that, and we sure as heck didn't back in the early 1970s. So that's the question: what is this, and where did it come from?
Oh wow! Now you have some other stories. You said that also. Let's see. You mentioned a Bigfoot. You mentioned what was that? The Dog Man.
Right. Well, hey, before I get to the Dog Man and Bigfoot, let's you'd asked me about famous cases, and this I had two, and this one was the least famous of the two.
Okay.
The other one is from Ashland, Nebraska, from the late 1960s, involving a man named Herbert Schirmer. And Herb Schirmer, he was in the Navy, and when he got out of the Navy, he got out when he was still very young. He wanted to become a highway patrolman, and his parents had moved to a small town in Nebraska, and he went and lived with them. And to become a patrolman, he had to have a background check done. And he went to the local police station in Ashland, Nebraska, to get the background check. And after the background check, the police chief said, "Well, we've got a position open. Would you like to work for us as a police officer?" And he said, "Sure." So Schirmer became a policeman with the Ashland, Nebraska police force. And he was exactly the kind of guy that the small town police force wants, but exactly not the kind of guy that the local teenagers want, because he was a real stickler for the law, and he commonly would drive in the evening up by Lover's Lane and run all the teenagers making out away from Lover's Lane.
Yeah.
You know, pour out their beer and make them go home.
Yeah.
So he was not popular with the teenagers. But one night he was doing rounds. It's 1:00 in the morning. He drove to the outskirts of town. There were a number of businesses on a highway, and when he was out there, he checked the doors to make sure they were locked and everything was fine, and he noticed that there were red lights at the end of this highway where there was a turnaround, and he thought it looked like a large truck, like a large dump truck that had overturned. So he drove out there to take a look at it, and when he got there, it wasn't a truck. It was a circular craft that was floating 6 feet off the ground. There were some things that happened that I'll get to in a minute,
Okay.
but he blacked out.
Wow.
And when he came to, it was about 20 minutes later, and the vehicle was gone. And he drove back to the police station, and there was an officer there, an older officer, more experienced, and he told the officer what had happened, and the guy said, do not talk about this, and whatever you do not file a report on seeing a UFO parked outside of the city. You are going to regret it the rest of your life if you do.
Oh my God.
And what did Schirmer do? He filed a report. And the report got in the hands of the Lincoln Star-Journal. Lincoln, Nebraska's state capital, and it's fairly close to Ashland. And then the story hit the AP, and it was all over the country, that this policeman had seen a UFO. And he got all sorts of attention, some of it positive, a lot of it from the townsfolk. It was negative. A dummy, he was hanged in effigy in the cemetery by teens with a sign on it making fun of him because of the UFO sighting. But he got a lot of national attention. People were from national publications were interviewing him, and Ashland was on the map because of this. At the time, the Condon report that was going on at the University of Colorado in Boulder, it was going on, and he was asked to go out there to so they could interview him about his UFO encounter, and he went. The police chief said, "Yeah, you need to go, so go do this." And when he was out there, he was interviewed by Dr. Leo Sprinkle, who's still around, and I interviewed him for the book. And Schirmer was put under hypnosis. And one of the things that Sprinkle told me was that Schirmer was, whether or not this actually happened, Schirmer was certain it happened. But Schirmer told him some things under hypnosis that he hadn't remembered before. When he had pulled up to what he thought was a truck and saw that it was a UFO, there were people there. They looked human, and they were wearing coveralls, sort of a uniform. There was an insignia on the breast that looked like Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, the Aztec feathered serpent god. And a person approached the vehicle and asked Schirmer if he was the watchman. And Schirmer, he's a police officer, so he said, "Yeah, I'm the watchman." And the beings took him inside the craft and showed him how it worked, and told him that they'd be back and put him back in his car. And that's when he woke up.
Wow.
Well, when he got home, from Colorado, a lot of weird things happened. The weirdest one is not the UFO. It's the fact that the police chief resigned, and Schirmer was appointed chief of police of Ashland.
Oh.
And at that time, he got a book deal that I don't think he ever wrote. He said he got contacted a couple more times by the space people saying that, that the Earth, we've got to take care of the Earth better. And under all sorts of pressure from, his new position at the police department and the citizens of Ashland not wanting anything to do with this, he had a nervous breakdown and woke up one night holding a gun on his wife. So at that point, he decided, I'm done with this, and he resigned and he moved away. I could not get him to talk to me for the book. He's living, at least last time I checked, in the southeast. I also interviewed Brad Steiger. I'm sure that name's probably familiar to you.
Oh, and Brad, yeah.
Audience. Yeah, I interviewed Brad on this, and he had interviewed Schirmer as well, and gotten a fairly well-known hypnotist at the time to put Schirmer under hypnosis to see what else he could tell them, and Brad had the same came to the same conclusion that Dr. Sprinkle did, was that I don't know if this happened, but Schirmer is certain that all this is true.
So he was abducted by aliens, and they came back and did it several times. And they gave him the message that we need to take care of the Earth.
Right.
Yeah. Huh. And did they? And then so how many more times did they come back? They just stopped seeing him. They stopped abducting him.
Well, and it really wasn't an abduction. The first time he went aboard the craft, but they invited him.
Oh, You mean they invited him? They didn't just take him?
No, they said, "Do you want to come and see the craft?" And he walked in.
Jason, I never heard. I've done several shows on abductions, and never once were they asked. They were just taken.
And most of them, that's the case in most of those. There's another one that comes to mind. I don't remember where in the country this happened, but a woman, her last name was Andreessen, and it was the same type of scenario, that she was not abducted. She was invited to come aboard the craft, and she said, "Yes, I'll come."
Oh my gosh, I have never heard that. Did he give a description of these aliens?
Well, yes, they looked human. Again, they were wearing coveralls with an insignia, like a military insignia on their chest. The coveralls also, he drew a picture of them. They also had kind of hoods over their heads, and a device on their ear that he speculated was for some kind of communication.
That's very interesting. And he and during the hypnosis, it was verified then that this really did happen to him.
Well, and the two different sessions with Dr. Sprinkle for the Condon report, and with Brad Steiger, they both said that they're not sure if it happened, but Schirmer was sure that it happened.
The person
he was, the person, Herbert Schirmer, the guy who encountered all this, to him, it was real.
Well, Jason, when somebody goes under hypnosis, isn't that the real deal when they go under hypnosis, because they're telling you what's in their memory?
Well, I don't. Hypnosis is still kind of it's still kind of out there for me. Although I did go through past life regression once for a news story I was working on, and that seemed extremely real. But I don't know if testimony under hypnosis is admissible in a court yet. I don't think so.
Wow. Okay, so can we go on to some of the other stories then?
Absolutely.
All right, now you have a well, what are some of the scarier ones, like hauntings or ghosts or the dog man? What other? You have also a Mamu, a Bigfoot type.
Right. Well, I think one of the creepier ones. There's a family here in the town where I live. The house where this family lives. The children didn't live in that house. They didn't live in that house until they were older teenagers. And so there really wasn't much weird going on, except for the family would notice every once in a while there'd be something at their feet. They didn't quite know what it was because they'd look and they didn't see it, but it was sort of like a brown furry thing that when they looked down, they it wasn't there, but they would see it out of the corner of their eye, and they were so convinced something was there that they would try and step over it. They wouldn't, they didn't want to step on it. That's one thing that they noticed. But when the children grew up and graduated, went to college, got married afterward, when they would come home to the house with the grandkids, the grandchildren would talk about a little boy that lived in the house, and his name was David. And none of the children liked David because David would push them, he would yell at them, say mean things, he would take toys away from them, he would pinch them. The parents really didn't think anything of it. It was just children's imaginations. But one of the kids liked David. And they would, a grandparent or the mom would be walking by a room where the boy was playing, and they would hear him having a conversation. And they would stop and listen, and it would be exactly like he was having a conversation with somebody. He said something, he waited for a response, he would nod his head, and then, he would say something back, but they could never hear the other part of the conversation. Again, they chalked that up to just being, being the kid's imagination. One night when they were all there, they were watching TV, and that one boy who liked David was flipping through the TV guide and came to a page where there was an ad for a horror movie, and there's just a hideous monster there, and he got really excited, and he said, "Mom, look, David, this is a picture of David." And the mom started getting concerned about that point. The other kids were still terrified of David, and none of the adults had ever seen him until one night. One of the older ones, who was 8 months pregnant at the time, was at the house visiting her mom and dad, and got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and she walked out into the hallway. And there was a dim light in the hallway, and she saw at the other end of the hall, it was a short hallway, at the other end she saw a boy about 6-7 years old, dressed in knickers, what little boys would have worn in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Well, he had, blonde hair and a page boy cut, standing there just staring at her malevolently. And she was in shock and stood there for a while, and he eventually faded and went away. So, she was pregnant, so maybe that had something to do with him and children. But this is the creepy part to me, is the fact that only the kids could see him. And the kids were mostly terrified of him.
Oh, my gosh. Okay, so then at one point you said that there was an advertisement for a horror movie, and it was like a hideous image. Do you think that little boy spirit changed his images to different people so they wouldn't see what he really looked like? Do you think the kids really saw that he did look like a monster?
Well, that very well could be it. I think probably the guys that this entity, I won't even call it a little boy, that this entity was putting on, probably put on a happy face for the adult who saw him.
So whatever happened to this ghost David?
I haven't talked to any of the people since the book came out. I don't know if he's still haunting the house or not.
Oh, and he just so the little boy, one of the kids just talk to this David. Does anything happen? Does he play with them? Does he give them any kind of messages? What does he do? Does he have a purpose?
No. With the one boy who liked to play with him, they would play and they would hold conversations. The other children, this David entity would push them and pinch them and take their toys away from them.
What kind of conversations would they have?
Well, the mom said generally it sounded like arguments.
Oh.
And it was that the little boy, that her son didn't want to do something, and David was wanting him to do it, and the little boy never really would tell mom what David was trying to get him to do.
Did the mother ask her son to ask this ghost, spirit, whatever, get some questions answered for her, like where did he come from? Did he have a last name? How old really was he, and why was he there?
Well, this is the issue with a lot of hauntings and things of this nature. People don't want to know.
Really?
I know this because no, she didn't ask, and I know this personally about not wanting to know because I encountered the ghost of a little boy in my house, and I've never researched it. I don't want to know. When I was growing up, that's when I saw it, and I don't want to know who he was, how he died, why he was there,
really?
Any of it.
Really? You're not curious?
Yeah.
You weren't curious about that?
Nope. I did. That would make it way too personal for me, and I just want to remember it as, wow, I saw a ghost once, and that's it.
Wow. Well, we're all different. I need to know. I'm the kind of person that has to know. What other scary...
The thing is, I want to know when it happens to somebody else. I just don't want to know when it happens to me.
Are you scared?
No, I don't. It's too personal. I don't want it to be personal.
Okay.
And this is what I've said for years is the paranormal is great as long as it's happening to somebody else. It's not fun anymore when it's happening to me.
I love it. I love the paranormal. Oh, yeah, so what other scary stories? Like you have woods in Missouri. Are there things that are creeping around that nobody knows what they are?
Well, there are. Missouri, and this doesn't fit in with the book because these encounters happened in Louisiana, Missouri, which was completely the other side of the state. But in the early 70s, we had what's known as MOMO, which stands for the Missouri Monster. There were people in a little town, Louisiana, Missouri, which is between Hannibal and which is where Mark Twain grew up, between Hannibal and St. Louis, right on the Mississippi River. And in the early 70s, and I remember this because when I was a little kid, I was a newspaper nerd. And every day when we had the newspaper, I would look through it for anything that would interest me. And one day I saw a story about Bigfoot. And what this monster did, the first encounter was a girl. She was 16. She was doing dishes. And her two younger brothers were playing out in the yard. They were on the outskirts of town next to a whole bunch of trees. And she just looked out. She was doing the dishes, looked out at her little brothers, and noticed that there was an 8-foot-tall bipedal creature covered with hair, just glaring at her little brothers. And she went and yelled at her brothers, and they turned and noticed what was glaring at them, and they booked it to the house. This family saw this creature a couple of more times, and it even left footprints in their garden, which were enormous three-toed footprints.
Three?
Three.
But you know what, Jason? That's not typical of a Bigfoot. They have more toes than three.
Well, and that's not atypical, though, because the Honey Island monster in Louisiana, which is a Bigfoot, also is a three-toed creature.
I never heard of that one.
Right, there are a number of Bigfoot stories across the country where they have three toes and not five. Generally, when we think of Bigfoot, we think of, it's just an enormous human-sized foot, but there are also other cases where they've got three toes.
Oh wow! How many sightings of this Momo have there been?
Well, there were. This happened just within a couple of week period. This family saw it 3 different times. There was a farmer who lost his dog, and then got a call from another farmer not too far away who said he saw this creature carrying his dead dog across the field. I think the creepiest story though is a couple of teenage girls were in a park, and they're having a picnic. They spread their blanket out. They had food, and they were sitting on the blanket eating, and all of a sudden they smelled this horrendous musky smell, and they looked up and saw this enormous hairy bipedal creature looking at them, and they screamed and ran away from their picnic and hopped in the car, and the girl whose car it was realized my purse is sitting on the picnic blanket. My keys are on the picnic blanket.
Oh no.
And this thing got close enough to the car, got close to the car and pressed its face up against the glass to glare at these two poor girls who were just screaming like crazy. Eventually it went away, and they got brave enough to run down and get their car get the car keys and book out of there. But yeah, this thing terrorized the town of Louisiana for a few weeks, and I mean there were people out hunting for it, and just eventually it just stopped. The sightings just stopped.
So he was carrying away one of the animals. Was this something else he had done to other people where their animal was missing? Did he try to attack any human?
Well, human, no. There were never any reports of that. And Bigfoot, hating dogs is fairly common. Fairly common also.
Hating dogs, or do they want to eat them?
No, well, I don't know, not necessarily eating, but dogs don't like big feet, and big feet don't like dogs.
Oh well, maybe the animals, the dogs feel a threat. Maybe there's a threat there, and they can smell that.
Oh, I would think so. Yes.
Wow. What about time travel? What is that all about?
Well, time travel is one of my all-time favorite topics. It's one of my favorite. I'm a big science fiction nerd. It's one of my favorite science fiction topics. Most of my favorite Star Trek episodes from the original series have to do with time travel. But this story, I remember back in the early and mid '90s. I was listening to Art Bell way back then, and I remember one night listening to a story on a guy he called Madman Markham. And this is a guy who tried to build a time machine in his house and got arrested. And on the night that Art was reading the story, the guy's arresting officer called in, and they had a big laugh about it. And then that's when I didn't live where I'm living now, and when I moved up here, I caught a replay of that show, and I'm like, wait a second, the town this guy's in is about a half hour drive away from where I am right now, and it was. So what happened with this guy? And this was all on Art's show. He had moved from Cincinnati to a little town called Stanberry, Missouri. He had met a girl when he was in Stanberry, and she was from Albany, Missouri, which is about 15 minutes from Stanberry. And he moved all the way to Missouri from Ohio just to be with this girl. And as these cases usually work, it didn't work out, and they broke up. So he was living in Stanberry in a rental house, and he was all alone, and he was bored, and he was an electronics student when he was in Ohio, and he built a Jacob's ladder just for fun. And a Jacob's ladder in all the old horror movies, like the original Frankenstein and movies like that, there were always these two vertical metal rods with an electric current zipping up between them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when it gets to the top, the bars are too far away from each other and the current fizzles out. Well, he built one of those. And while he was sitting there watching it, again, it was on his kitchen table. While he was watching it, he noticed a weird heat signature over the Jacob's ladder. And he didn't think that should be there. So he did, what a normal guy would do. He picked something up and he threw it at it.
Oh.
So the thing he picked up was a finishing screw, and it hit the heat signature and disappeared. And about 10 seconds later, it reappeared and fell on the table. And he was convinced that he built a time machine.
Really?
So what he wanted to do at that point was, wow, I want to build a man-sized one. I got to jump through it. And he didn't want to do this, to increase the body of knowledge. He didn't want to do this for the betterment of mankind. He wanted to go 3 days in the future and get the lottery numbers and come back. That was his goal. So the problem was that, plugging something into a wall isn't going to give you enough power to travel through time, he figured. So he got a couple guys together, and they stole some power light, some transformers from St. Joseph Power and Light. Those big ones you put on a pole.
Uh-huh.
And so he brought them into his house, which is extremely dangerous. And he rewired one and hooked this man-sized Jacob's ladder up to it. And he was going to turn it on and jump through it. And when he turned it on, all the power in town went out, because it was a really small town. And because he had done this, the authorities were able to triangulate and figure out where the person responsible was, and they arrested him.
Oh.
And the newspaper got a hold of the story, and it made national news. Heck, Art Bell found the story in the New York Times. That's where the story wound up. Eventually, he got out of jail, served his time, got out, and moved to nearby St. Joseph, Missouri. And because he was on Art Bell again, and because he was on the Art Bell show, which was all around the country, people started sending him donations of money and equipment.
Wow.
And enough, he was able to start doing these experiments in the apartment where he lived. Well, there's a problem with that, because rumors got out that he was throwing cats through his time machine, and his landlord kicked him out.
Oh, no way. Oh,
and,
my
and
God.
Here's a direct quote from Markham. His direct quote was, "That cat thing, it just ain't true." And eventually, it was on Art Bell one more time, and Bell, because he was on that show, people started sending more money, and he was able to rent a warehouse in Kansas City.
Oh.
And he got on Art Bell's show one more time in 1997, and he said, "Art, my machine's ready. I'm going to jump through it tomorrow." And then from 1997 until 3 years ago, nobody heard from him again.
Do you think he really did?
Well, why I say 3 years ago, maybe it was 4 by now, I was able to find him.
Oh.
And I talked to the guy. And what happened, Markham swears this is what happened. He built this giant machine in this warehouse. And to make sure it worked, he started throwing grapefruit into it. And he said the grapefruit would disappear. And he would find them outside the parking lot. Well, and here's the issue with time travel that the movies and TV never go into, is that, okay, Back to the Future, Marty McFly went back from 1985 to 1955. The Earth wasn't in the same place it is in 1955 as it was in 1985, because the Earth's spinning, it's going around the sun. The Milky Way, or our galaxy's spinning, the universe is spinning. So, time traveling, if you would go through a time machine 10 years in the future, the exact space that you're now inhabiting would be out in outer space somewhere. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because you're not gonna step through a time machine and in 10 years land in the same spot on Earth.
Yeah.
Because the Earth and the sun and everything's moving. You'd be out in outer space somewhere. So what he figured out was, this thing is zipping a couple of seconds in the future. So of course the grapefruit's going to end up in the parking lot because the Earth's moving. And then he bought some guinea pigs and threw them into the time machine.
Oh no!
And they did exactly the same thing, except for the fact that they were dead.
Oh my God! So,
go ahead.
God. Well, then if the animals were dead, what about the fruit? Was it still in perfect condition, or was that like smushed or anything? Were they?
It looked normal.
Oh, it did.
It looked normal. And he figured that, the time machine works because things disappear and then they reappear somewhere else. The guinea pigs are dead, but it's probably because they're too small and their systems can't handle it. And he decided he was just going to jump through it. So, according to him, that's what he did. And he said the next thing he remembers after jumping into his machine was waking up in shorts and a t-shirt, because it was where he was in Kansas City. It was warm. He woke up on a snowy field.
Oh wait!
And he had no idea where he was.
Jason, if he threw animals through that machine and they came out on the other end dead, how the heck did he make it?
Well, he said he figures because he was a bigger body, his body was able to withstand, whatever he went through.
Did he? Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
But he said that he jumped through, and the next thing he remembered, or next thing he knew, that he was, laying in this field, corn, like a field, like a cornfield or a soybean field. He didn't know what it was because it was, it had been harvested and there was snow on the ground, and he had no idea who he was or what was going on. And somebody was able to find him and took him to a homeless shelter, and he said he didn't regain his memory for 2 years.
Wow.
And by the time he regained his memory and understood, what had happened, he, got out of the, where he was, and got a job and got enough money to where he traveled to Kansas City. And he said, as everything, of course, at the warehouse was gone. He has nothing to prove or disprove what he did, but he told me that he traveled a couple years through time.
Well, if he had been smart about that, he would have had somebody witness this.
Well, yeah, he said he videotaped everything, and all of his equipment and everything was gone when he got there, and that's his story. Wow.
All right, what about demonic possessions in the area?
Well, I interviewed. He was a teenager at the time. Him and his father. When this guy was really young, his family lived in an old, really large farmhouse out in the country, and they would see they'd see shadow beings, shadow people in the house, a lot. But the boy would see them more than the other people. Well, they eventually sold the farm and moved into town, this town where I live, and nobody saw the shadow beings anymore except this boy. Well, as he got older, he started seeing, instead of the shadow man out of the corner of his eye, he started seeing him more head on. And eventually the shadow person started talking to him and started telling him, to do things, to hurt himself and things of that nature, which he resisted doing. Eventually he, got old enough. He got a girlfriend, and the shadow being hated the girlfriend. The shadow being was never around whenever the girlfriend was there.
Okay, Jason. Okay, if the shadow person hated the female, do you think the shadow person, I don't know if they have sex I don't know if they're male or female, but is it possible that maybe the shadow person gave the image of a shadow, but they were really a female spirit?
Maybe it didn't, because the being eventually pulled the shadow back and revealed itself, and it was male, but it could have been female. Entities like this can appear as anything or anyone, anytime or anywhere.
I never thought about male or female for a shadow person, and I guess these entities can have an attraction, I guess, maybe to the same sex. Does that make sense, maybe?
Well, yeah, it does. I don't think this is the case because of something that happened later.
Oh.
But the shadow being, whenever he was around his girlfriend or talking to the girlfriend on the phone, the shadow being wouldn't be there. But whenever he took the girlfriend home or got off the telephone with her, the shadow being would come back, and the teenager would experience massive headaches. And he felt that he was being punished for being with the girl. His family were church-going people, and one day when they were at church, he started experiencing this horrible headache, and he had to get up and leave, and he went out to the vestibule, and when he went out to the vestibule, the shadow being appeared to him and told him he had to go get in his pickup and leave. So the boy went out and got into his truck, and he said the only thing he remembers, or the last thing he remembers, is starting the vehicle. And then he woke up an hour later, and he was, he was over 100 miles away.
Oh, really?
And he was sitting at a gas station, and the vehicle was out of gas, and he had no memory whatsoever about that period. And he said this sort of thing started happening a lot. The thing would appear and tell him to do something, and the more he tried to ignore it, the worse the headaches got. Eventually, he and the girlfriend broke up. The entity had told him to kill his girlfriend on numerous occasions. And then when the girlfriend was out of the picture, he started telling him to kill his father.
Oh my goodness.
And as I said, his family was religious, and he had a real heart-to-heart with his father, and they attempted an impromptu exorcism. And the entity left for a while. He said that the last time I talked to him, he said the entity's still not back, but he feels it's there. It's just not presenting itself to him in the way it was. He's expecting that to happen at some point, though.
No kidding. Did this entity ever bother the girlfriend? Ever appear to her?
No, it only appeared to him. The only other person that the entity appeared to was the father, and he said it was during the exorcism. The father said that he saw the shadow entity looming standing behind his son, and he beckoned it to be gone in the name of Christ, and the thing faded out.
Yes.
But as the boy said, it's still there.
Oh boy! Oh, wow. I wonder if this entity is, while he's sleeping, might be giving him suggestions, and he doesn't remember them when he wakes up, because that that happens. You know, you'll have a dream, but you don't always remember your dream.
Right. Right. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, that's when somebody's the most vulnerable. So I mean, that very well could be happening.
Damn. Anything other scary stories that you might want to tell us without telling us everything in your book, or?
Well, okay. Well, it's the one I'll mention that isn't in the book. However, it's related to a story in the book. I talked to you before about dogmen.
Yeah.
But again, I have a dogman story in my book, but this dogman story that I have for you happened outside of a 100-mile radius. There's a guy I've gotten to be friends with him over the years. I've interviewed him enough times and we've hung out. He has a paranormal investigating group, at least he did at the time, and they would go to this one specific cemetery in Brunswick, Missouri. Just north of town, out on a dirt road, and the cemetery is really it behaves oddly. The time I was there, there's a fence around it, and there are pasture. And the pasture, there were a lot of cows. I grew up on a farm, and I know how cattle behave. And these cattle were all standing there the entire time. We were there for hours. They just stood there and stared at us. They made no noise whatsoever, which is atypical. But he and his friends have gone out there numerous times, and they noticed that things would be different each time that they go out there. That the tombstones looked like they were in a different place, and they even took to each time they go out, just draw a map of all the tombstones and trees, and the maps from one session to the next never matched up. So it was like the tombstones and the trees moved every time that they went out there. But they had he had one of his friends, just two of them went out one night, and when they were out there, nothing particularly strange was happening in the cemetery. So about 10 o'clock at night, they decided to go home. And it was, again, on a gravel road off of a rural highway, and it went, quarter of a mile to a half of a mile, and there were a couple of hills you had to go up and down, and at the bottom of one hill, and this is just surrounded by trees, they saw there was a dog in the middle of the road, and they had their windows down. It was warm, and they pulled up to the dog, and they figured that when a truck approached it, that the dog would get up and leave, but it didn't. And the driver honked his horn a couple of times, and the dog turned around and looked up at them. And I talked to both of these gentlemen, and they said that they could smell wet dog coming through the open windows. And the dog stood up on two legs as it was looking at them.
On two legs?
On its hind legs, and then turned its head away from them and walked on two legs into the trees and disappeared, and they got the heck out of there.
Oh, wow. Oh my gosh. I think I've heard that before from Linda Godfrey, who's written a book on Dogman.
Right. Yeah, she's done a lot of research on these. Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, that's pretty creepy. How tall was this Dogman, or this dog?
You know what? They didn't really know. They were pretty much in shock.
Oh, wow, I guess so. Oh my God. How did you get that story?
Well, it was a guy I know, and he told it to me.
Oh, wow. That would scare the hell out of me, I'll tell you that. Absolutely. I mean, you just don't know what's... and even in the woods, you don't know what's in these woods. And like you told me about this like 8-man with 3 toes. I never heard of that one before. I thought I heard everything, but I've never heard about that one. So there's so many of these things that are cropping up, and new monsters all the time, Jason, all the time. So there's a new one that we haven't heard about before.
Right. I I compiled and I haven't gotten this in I mean, I haven't gotten this ready to send to a publisher yet, but I had worked on, for a little over a year, a book that I'm calling American Monsters. And what I did is I went to, I researched each state to find the monsters that are specific to each of those states.
Uh-huh.
And there are a lot of really, really bizarre and creepy and sometimes funny cryptids roaming the hills and forests of this country. It's pretty fascinating.
Oh, well, that ought to be an interesting. Good. Will you come back when you have that one? But I want to do a show with you. Hey, I want to do a show with you on haunted Missouri. There's some really good stories on haunted Missouri.
Right, I would love to.
Okay.
I would love to. That was a really fun book to research and write.
Okay, we'll do that. Okay, so everybody, Jason can be found on www.jasonoffutt.com. You can find out all the information you want on Jason and all his books. He has, what do you have, about 17 books?
No, not quite that many. I think it's 14. It's close enough.
Oh, you know what? We have, wait a minute. We have somebody's asking a question. This Troy Woods has asked 2 questions. He wants to know, do you have any Ouija board stories?
Oh, yeah, I've written a number, because I mentioned the newspaper column that I used to write. I had quite a few Ouija board stories, and none of them turned out good.
Do you want to tell one?
All right, yeah, I'll tell one. There was a woman I interviewed. She was in her mid to late 30s when I talked to her, but this was a story from when she was in college in a college in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. It was a religious school. She was her girlfriends were sitting in her room and on the second floor of their dorm, and they were doing a Ouija board session. And they had it sitting out at the planchette, and they were asking questions, and they had candles lit, and the window was shut, the door was shut, and it's every once in a while a breeze would kick up and blow the candles out, and they would light the candles again, and eventually they contacted something that started talking to them. And as these things usually go, it was friendly at first. It was making jokes with them, and then his conversation got a little darker. And finally, one of the girls said, "Who are you? Mm-hmm. Could you have a name?" And the name spelled out Satan. And generally, when you're talking to bad entities, they never tell their real name.
No.
The negative entities don't usually do that. They give false names. So was this the devil? Probably not. But it gave that name, and the girls screamed. And one of the girls said, "Where are you?" And it spelled out, "I'm coming for you. Look at the window." And then the lights blew out again, and they looked up at the window, and there was the silhouette of a man's head and shoulders in the window, and they were up on the second floor. And the girls again screamed and jumped up and bolted out of there and went to one of the other girls' rooms to spend the night. And the next day, again, it was a religious school, it was a Catholic school. They got one of the priests to come up to bless the room, and he scolded them something fierce, as well he should have. But this is really typical of Ouija board sessions. I recommend nobody use Ouija boards, or seances fit in the same category. Automatic writing fits in the same category. Talking to someone who's not there in an empty room fits in the same category. You don't know who you're talking to. You were basically sticking your hand up and saying, "Hey, come talk to me. Come stick around with me. I don't care who you are. I don't know where you're from. I don't know if you're evil or good, but just come and talk to me."
Absolutely.
And yeah, that's just way too many negative stories that I don't think people should mess with this at all.
No. I've heard stories. In fact, oh my God, the Constantinos. Oh God, Mark and oh God, I forget her name. I did a show years ago with them, 2012, and they were both scared to death, Jason, because that's all they do. You know, they were always on ghost adventures. Debbie Constantino, that's it. They were always on ghost adventures, and that's what they did. That was their specialty. Contacting the dead through EVP work with their voice recorders. And that particular night that they were on the show, on my show, they both told us they were scared to death. And Mark said Debbie is especially scared that they said they had to stop doing EVP work. It was getting extremely dangerous, and they were very, very scared. But you know what, Jason? They never did. They never stopped. And, you know, they're both dead now. And God only knows if any of that might have had something to do with what was going on in their life, you know?
Well, that could very well be it, because they were inviting, you know, things to join them. They were you know, attracting attention. A story that I like to tell about this, not a Ouija board, just attracting attention. I interviewed a guy a number of years ago. He lives in southern Missouri, and he's a hunter, and he owns a plot of land out in the middle of nowhere. And he said one night, it was the night before deer season, and he keeps a little trailer, that you haul behind a vehicle. He keeps it out on his land so he can sleep in when he goes hunting. And he was out there before hunting season, and he had a fire going on, and he was just sitting on a log drinking a few beers, and he was going to get up in the morning and go out and hunt first thing, because it was the first day of hunting season. And he said that he felt that there was something out there with him. Couldn't see it, had no idea what it was. He just felt there was something. So he said, I know there's something out there. Whatever's out there, just come and join me. Sit down by the fire, have a beer, and we'll just talk. And nothing happened until he went to sleep. And when he went to sleep, there was banging on the door, and the trailer was rocking. And he was scared enough to where he yelled and threatened whoever was outside the door that he was going to shoot, and the thing didn't stop, and he shot through the door. And he didn't go out and look until the next morning, and there was nothing there. There was no blood. There'd been nobody there. And after that, he said for about 6 months or more, wherever he went, things would just fall off the shelves around him as he walked by, or the door would move, 6 to 8 inches as he, went to push it. It would move without him touching it, and it would shut behind him a little bit as he walked through it. So he was convinced that his invitation, brought something to follow him.
Oh wow, absolutely. I used to do EVP work, and I don't do any of that anymore. Not anymore. I used to hear voices all the time. I'm not nuts, but I used to hear voices all the time and conversations in my house. I could hear spirits. I could hear spirits carrying on conversations, Jason. And I stay out of it. I don't want to get involved anymore with that, because since I stopped doing paranormal investigation, my life has been so good. I've had 3 attachments. And believe me, you'll know when you get an attachment. Paranormal investigating is the worst thing you could possibly get involved in. And I don't recommend it to anybody, even to those who say they're experts in it. It's very, very dangerous. I've had 3 clearings, and thank God I was able to get cleared, or my life would be miserable. So I stay away from that now. So I just do my shows. It's a lot safer.
Well, and here's what I do, because I mean, in all the stories that I write, Well, not every single one of them, because if I'm interviewing somebody in Australia, I don't have the money just to hop in a plane. But most of the stuff I do is within driving distance. So I go to these haunted locations. I interview people who've experienced things. I hang out in these locations. There was a Victorian mansion in Independence, Missouri, that I stayed from 10 till 2 in the morning at this very spot that this woman killed herself, and her ghost supposedly shows up there all the time. So I go, but I always go as a journalist. I'm a storyteller. I'm not a ghost hunter. I'm not looking for anything. So I don't have things follow me.
But honey, you know what? It doesn't make any difference, Jason. They will still follow you home. If they want to, they will follow you home. They don't stay. I had the whistler from the USS Hornet come home. He's a well-known ghost on the Hornet. He came to my house a couple of times, scared the hell out of me. He whistled right behind me. It scared me. Oh my God. But he didn't stick around. He left. But they can follow you.
I've been to hundreds of places, and I've never gone looking for anything, so I'm sticking with, if I'm not looking for it, it's not looking for me.
Yes, stay away.
It's worked for me so far.
Oh, God. I love talking about this stuff. Jason, thank you so much, honey, for coming back on the show. I'll get a hold of you. I'm full up until June. I already have my...
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, yes, I know.
Congrats, that's awesome.
So I will. I'll send you a couple of dates. Okay, when you want to come back, and we'll do Haunted Missouri.
Sure, love to.
Awesome, everybody. Thank you. Thank Jason for being on the show. It was wonderful to have you back, and good luck with all your books. And I will be in touch with you and have you back on the show. We'd love to have you back.
Thanks, Norene. That's terrific. And if I may, all of your all of your audience, if you have any questions or comments for me, my website is www.jasonoffutt.com. All my contact info's there. Just get a hold of me. Ask me any question you want.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason. Good night, honey. Oh, and Merry Christmas, Jason. I forgot. Christmas is coming.
All right. Yeah, it is. Well, I don't have to worry. Christmas is secondary. My son's birthday was a few days ago. My daughter's was today. So that's where my head is.
Oh, awesome. Happy
Christmas
holidays. Well, happy holidays anyway. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Oh, everybody, thank you. Thank you, Jason. Don't forget to visit his website. It's very interesting. He has a lot of information on there, and I'm telling you, some of the books he has is unbelievable. Awesome, awesome writer. So let's do, and before I forget, I want to thank my mods so much for being here tonight. Of course, Royce Hinman, Unique Annie, and Crystal Triplet, thank you so much for being here. If it wasn't for them, we would not have the awesome chat room that we have. And I want to wish everybody a very, very Merry Christmas. It's going to be really, really busy for us this Christmas season. We have 25 for the holiday dinner, and this weekend I have to go over my daughter's and help her set up everything. So everybody, thank you so much for joining me. The next show is December 28th, the last Thursday of the month, and Vanessa Hogel will be returning to the show, and we are going to do strange and mysterious murders and disappearances, and I have some really awesome cases that I found that are pretty friggin' creepy. And I can't wait to present them on the show. So before I go, my husband's waiting for me to have dinner. Let's do some shout outs, okay? And I know Royce is gonna. Let me see if I can pull this out. I don't want to screw this up. Oh, I don't know how to do it. Pop out chat. Okay, I'm gonna pop out the chat. Okay, here we go. Of course, Royce Hinman, Rebecca Smith, Texas Nancy, Paranormal Pixie 78, Unique Annie, Zippy Davis, Crystal Triplet, Don Peyote, Chippa Michael Kane. Hi, Michael. oh God. Now see, wait a minute. Hold on. Chippeterry, B3 Airspace, Diane Hilbert, Shelties Shangri-La. Oh, hi Mike, Haunted Roads Media. Hi Mike. Yes, Vanessa, awesome. I love having her on the show. Vanessa does a show with Mike Ricksecker on the Haunted Roads Media. I believe they're Tuesday night. Mike, do you want to put in your link to your show? It's I think The Edge of the Rabbit Hole. It's an excellent talk show that they do every Tuesday. Thanks for being here, Mike. Movie Star Memories, Janice Bolt, Punji Fungi. We had a nice crowd. There's, I was just going to say, Carl White. There you are. Hey, Carl, I friended you on Instagram. I sent you a little message. I'm pretty sure that's you. Thanks, Carl White. I was at 3 o'clock in the morning. He's here without fail every show. Thank you so much. Rebecca Smith, Paraprincess Patricia. I hope you really enjoyed the show tonight, because there's nothing more fabulous than having those who are writers, and I love presenting their books. They're so talented, and all the information that they share with us. I love that. Louis De Leon, Ether Shadow, Norene Yarborough. Well, I'll be darned. You spell your name the same way I do. That is so rare. Wow. Thank you. Hi, Noreen. And Jessica Luna, Maria Sandra Amador. Anybody else want to shout out? Darlene Schitznader. Oh, Darlene, by the way, Alan's coming back February 1st. Oh, my God. The shows that I have lined up so far, I am full. I have booked through June. Unbelievable. Wait till you see the shows that are coming. I'm so excited. Daniel Polk. Anyway, yeah, so Alan is coming back February 1st for his new book. Next show is December 28th. Anybody else want to shout out? Gook Sister, Gucci Star. Oh, Gucci Star. Oh, I will. You know, one of these days I will. You know, when we're just hanging out, I'd come on and I'll do a show, and I got to remember everything. I've had 50 years of paranormal experiences, and I was thinking, I told my husband, I think I'm going to write a book, because some of this stuff is pretty crazy that I've been through and things that have happened, and I just might write a book. Troy Woods. Anybody else want to shout out? We had a lot of people tonight. Anybody else? Oh, really? Are you new Paranormal Pixie 78? You know, you can also, oh, hi, Margarita. How about, hey, don't forget, you can sign up for show reminders. Go to paranormalzone.tv, and there's a little tab that says show reminders, and you can get on the emailing list. One of these days when I have time, I'll redo my website because it's pretty sucky. Movie Star Memories. Okay, anybody else want to shout out before we go? Bethany Warner. Oh, Anita Ackerman. Wow, I haven't seen you. Uncle Vinny. Yes, Anita. Uncle Vinny. Anybody else want to shout out before I go? Thank you all so much for being here. And you know, we hit over 26,000 subscribers and over 4 million views now on the channel, and they're all real. I didn't buy any of them. People can buy subscribers and views, and mine are all real. That's why I'm so excited about that. So, anyway, so I'm going to go. Merry Christmas. Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget, next show, December 28th. And I'm telling you, I have some awesome shows coming up in the new year, and I'm really excited And what's so really awesome now is people are messaging me to come on my show, which is so exciting. Because I thought, oh my God, I got to start another year. I got to look for guests, and I'm already half full for the year. So it's really, really nice. So everybody, great. Have a great evening. Have a great weekend, and happy holidays. Thank you so much. Love you guys. Good night.